Welcome back to Echoed Notes, where real history is retold with depth, clarity, and immersive detail. Today, we began one of the most dramatic and consequential stories in world history, the rise of the Romanov Dynasty, the imperial family that ruled Russia for more than 300 years before the empire collapsed in 1917. But let me ask you first, have you ever wondered how a small noble family rose to rule 1/6 of the earth? What decisions, alliances, and tragedies shaped the destiny of the last Russian Empire? And how did the world's most powerful monarchy fall in a single year? If you find stories like this fascinating, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Tell me below, which dynasty, empire, or forgotten historical era should I cover next? Now settle in, because this is the beginning of a monumental story.
The Russia before the Romanovs. To understand the rise of the Romanov dynasty, one must begin with the state of Russia before they came to power. The early 17th century was a time known in Russian history as the Time of Troubles, a period marked by famine, political chaos, impostors claiming the throne, foreign invasions, and the collapse of the established ruling line. The once powerful Rurik dynasty, which had ruled Russia since the 9th century, came to a sudden end in 1598 with the death of Tsar Fyodor I, son of Ivan the Terrible. Fyodor, gentle but weak, left no heir. His death created a void that powerful boyar clans rushed to fill. What followed was nearly 2 decades of collapse.
Russia faced the worst famine in its early history, 1601-1603. The appearance of false Dmitris, impostors claiming to be Ivan the Terrible's son. Polish and Swedish armies occupying parts of the country. Civil war among the boyars. Violent uprisings by starving peasants. Cities burned, villages vanished, entire regions emptied. It was a time when ordinary Russians truly believed the world might end. Into this chaotic world, the Romanovs were not yet powerful. In fact, they were vulnerable. 2. The Romanovs before power. The Romanov family traced its origins to the noble Zakharin-Yuriev clan. Their rise began modestly when Anastasia Romanovna, a Zakharin-Yuriev, married Ivan the Terrible and became Tsarina. Her gentle influence was said to soften the Tsar's notorious temper.
Anastasia's early death fueled Ivan's paranoia, but it also elevated her family. Her relatives, including her brother Nikita Romanovich, became respected nobles. Yet by the time of troubles, even the Romanovs were not safe. They were viewed with suspicion by rival boyar families. Many Romanovs were imprisoned, exiled, or forced into hiding. The dynasty that one day would rule Russia was at this moment nearly extinguished. Among the survivors of political purges was a young man named Michael Romanov. He was gentle, shy, and only 16 years old. No one imagined he would one day be Tsar. 3. The turning point, the National Assembly of 1613. By 1612, Russia had reached a breaking point. Foreign armies occupied Moscow. The economy collapsed.
Lawlessness spread so widely that entire peasant bands formed private armies. In response, a national volunteer army led by Kuzma Minin, a merchant, and Prince Dmitry Pozharsky, a noble, restored Russian self-rule and expelled the foreign occupiers. After retaking Moscow, the leaders did something unprecedented. They called for a Zemsky Sobor, a national assembly, to elect a new Tsar. This assembly was made up of nobles, clergy, merchants, and even peasants. Russia's future would be decided through the broadest political gathering in its history. The candidates included powerful boyar families like the Shuskis, foreign princes, experienced generals, relatives of the late Rurik rulers. Michael Romanov was not on anyone's list at first.
He was too young, inexperienced, and politically insignificant. But he had 3 things that Russia desperately needed. He had no blood feud with anyone. He was related by blood to the beloved Tsarina Anastasia. He was seen as innocent, untouched by the horrors of the time of troubles.
When representatives visited him at the Ipatiev monastery, where he lived in hiding with his mother, he was stunned. He reportedly cried and asked, "Why do you choose me? I am too young and weak to rule the state." But the assembly insisted. Russia needed a symbol of peace, not another warlord. And so, in 1613, Michael Romanov became the first Tsar of a new dynasty. 4. A dynasty begins. Michael's early reign was quiet compared to the chaos that came before.
He focused on stabilizing the economy, restoring order, negotiating peace treaties, rebuilding Moscow, strengthening ties with the Russian Orthodox Church. Most importantly, he relied heavily on his father, Patriarch Filaret, a commanding religious figure who helped guide Russia toward stability. Together, they restored Moscow's authority. Under them, Russia began to heal. V. The consolidation of power. Michael's son, Alexei Mikhailovich, succeeded him in 1645. Alexei was deeply religious, thoughtful, and determined to strengthen the state. He became known as Alexei the Gentle, but his reign was anything but calm.
His time saw the Great Schism within the Russian Orthodox Church, the rise of powerful noble clans, major reforms to the legal code, territorial expansion, including eastern Ukraine, peasant unrest and Cossack uprisings. Despite these challenges, Alexei positioned the Romanovs as the unquestioned rulers of Russia. His marriage to Maria Miloslavskaya produced many children, including the future Tsars Fyodor III, Ivan V, and the remarkable daughter Sofia Alexeyevna. His second marriage to Natalia Narishkina produced Peter, a boy who would one day transform Russia forever. 6. The road toward Peter the Great. After Alexei's death in 1676, Russia entered a brief period of instability. His eldest son, Fyodor III, ruled wisely but died young.
The succession crisis between the Miloslavsky clan, supporting Ivan V, and the Narishkin clan, supporting young Peter, erupted into the bloody Streltsy uprising of 1682. In the end, both Ivan and Peter were declared co-tsars. Their sister Sophia ruled as regent. But Peter, even as a teenager, showed a restless, fearless nature. He built miniature fortresses, drilled mock armies, and spent time with foreign artisans learning shipbuilding. The seeds of Russia's transformation were being planted. 7. Part 1 Conclusion. The Foundation of Empire. Part 1 ends here, at the dawn of a new Russian age. The Romanovs rose from near extinction, united a devastated country, and positioned themselves to rule for centuries.
I. The Romanov Empire at its peak. By the late 19th century, the Romanov Dynasty stood at the height of its territorial power. Russia stretched across 11 time zones, from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean. Though modernization lagged behind Western Europe, the empire possessed enormous natural resources, a vast army, and immense geopolitical reach. This immense territory, however, hid deep fractures beneath the surface. Industrialization had begun, but unevenly. Peasants, still recovering from the abolition of serfdom in 1861, struggled with poverty. Workers in rapidly growing cities faced harsh conditions. Radical political ideology spread. The empire was modernizing, but also destabilizing. Amid these pressures, the Romanov family expected to continue its long-standing tradition of autocratic rule. And at the center of that tradition stood a young heir, Nicholas Alexandrovich Romanov. 2. Nicholas II, a reluctant Tsar. Born in 1868, Nicholas grew up under the shadow of his father, Alexander III, known for his imposing physical presence and strict conservatism. Alexander III ruled with iron certainty, convinced that autocracy was necessary to preserve Russia's unity. Nicholas admired his father deeply, but he did not inherit his confidence. Contemporaries described Nicholas II as gentle, polite, introspective, but indecisive. Even Nicholas himself confessed privately, "I am not prepared to be Tsar." When Alexander III died unexpectedly in 1894,
Nicholas, barely 26 years old, ascended the throne. His coronation was overshadowed by tragedy. During public celebrations, a crowd crush known as the Kodinka tragedy killed over 1,300 people. Nicholas attended a ball that same night under diplomatic pressure, a decision that haunted him. It created an early impression of detachment between the Tsar and his people. Despite these early challenges, the young Tsar's personal life soon took a dramatic turn. Third, Alexandra Fyodorovna. Love, devotion, and isolation. Nicholas had long been in love with Princess Alex of Hesse, a German princess and granddaughter of Queen Victoria. Their bond was emotional, sincere, and lifelong.
When they married in 1894, Nicholas wrote, "I cannot imagine life without you." Alex converted to Orthodoxy and became Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna. She was beautiful, intelligent, and deeply spiritual, but painfully shy. Russian society misinterpreted her reserve as arrogance. The aristocratic elite never fully accepted her. Court gossip plagued her from the beginning. Together, Nicholas and Alexandra were devoted spouses and parents. But their closeness also isolated them from political realities. Their greatest joy came with the birth of 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. The public, however, waited for an heir, a male successor, essential for the Romanov autocracy. Years passed without one.
Then, in 1904, the long-awaited heir was born, Alexei Nikolaevich, Tsarevich of Russia. But joy turned to heartbreak. Ivy, the secret tragedy, the Tsarevich's illness. Alexei's birth completed Nicholas and Alexandra's family, but soon after, doctors diagnosed him with hemophilia, a genetic disorder that prevented blood from clotting. A minor bruise could threaten his life. The disease was inherited through Alexandra's lineage. Queen Victoria was a carrier who unknowingly passed the gene to several royal houses. Alexandra was devastated. Her son's constant suffering filled her with fear. She lived in dread that the empire would discover the heir's condition, fearing political consequences. Thus, Alexei's illness became the greatest secret of the Romanov household. It was this desperation that opened the palace doors to one of the most controversial figures in Russian history, Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin, healer, mystic, and lightning rod. Rasputin was born a peasant in Siberia. He wandered monasteries and claimed mystical visions. By his 30s, he became known as a wandering holy man. His charisma, intense eyes, and reputation for spiritual insight attracted both admiration and distrust. Introduced to the royal family in 1905, Rasputin quickly gained Alexandra's trust because, inexplicably, he seemed able to relieve Alexei's symptoms during life-threatening episodes. Modern historians suggest Rasputin may have calmed Alexandra, who then calmed the child, whose bleeding was often worsened by stress. Whatever the cause, the results felt miraculous. To Alexandra, Rasputin was a God-sent protector of her son. To the Russian nobility, he was a dangerous intruder. Rumors spread that he influenced government decisions, that he controlled Alexandra, that he carried immoral behavior behind his holy image, that he weakened the monarchy's reputation. Whether exaggerated or true, the damage to the dynasty's public image was immense. 6. The empire weakens. Political and social unrest. The early 20th century was not a stable time for autocratic rule. The Russo-Japanese War, 1904-1905. Russia underestimated Japan. The defeat devastated national pride, weakened the military, and fueled criticism of Nicholas II. 1905 Revolution. Strikes, mutinies, and protests swept the empire. The tipping point was Bloody Sunday, when peaceful protesters were shot in St. Petersburg. Nicholas did not order the massacre, but the public blamed him. The Tsar issued the October Manifesto, granting civil liberties and creating a legislative Duma. It was a major reform, yet Nicholas soon restricted its power, alienating moderates. World War I, 1914-1918. Initially, patriotism surged, but Russia was unprepared for modern warfare. Millions died, the economy collapsed, and public anger intensified. Amid this turmoil, Alexandra took an increasing role in government. influenced heavily by Rasputin, while Nicholas personally commanded the army at the front. This decision left the capital politically unstable and further tarnished the monarchy's image. 7.
The murder of Rasputin, 1916. By 1916, Russia was exhausted. Food shortages, military defeats, and political paralysis fueled anger toward the monarchy. Nobles believed that removing Rasputin would save the empire. A group led by Prince Felix Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich assassinated Rasputin in December 1916. The details of the murder were later exaggerated, but the event became mythologized. Alexandra was heartbroken. Nicholas was furious. But the removal of Rasputin came too late to change the course of history. 8. The final descent toward revolution. By early 1917, the situation was catastrophic. Factories shut down. Food lines stretched for blocks. Soldiers deserted. Ordinary Russians lost faith in the monarchy. In February, mass protests erupted in Petrograd.
The military, exhausted and demoralized, joined the demonstrators. Nicholas attempted to return from the front, but was isolated. Train routes were blocked. Government ministers fled. Facing pressure from military commanders and the Duma, Nicholas II abdicated on March 15, 1917, ending more than 300 years of Romanov rule. He abdicated not only for himself, but also for his son Alexei. His brother Michael declined the throne. The dynasty ended within days. IX, Part 2, Conclusion. Part 2 closes with the collapse of imperial authority. Nicholas II and Alexandra, once crowned with unshakable certainty, now stood at the precipice of a new and dangerous era. What remained of the Romanov family, now prisoners of history, would face the final chapters of their long and complicated legacy.
Part 3 will cover the provisional government, Bolshevik rise, the imprisonment of the Romanovs, the chaos of civil war leading to their tragic end.
I. The aftermath of abdication, March 1917. When Nicholas II abdicated on March 15, 1917, more than 3 centuries of Romanov rule ended. But the fall of the Tsar did not immediately bring peace or stability. Instead, it opened an entirely new period of uncertainty. The provisional government, formed by liberal politicians from the Duma, attempted to establish a democratic system. Led initially by Prince Georgy Lvov and later by Alexander Kerensky, it promised civil liberties, political freedoms, and fundamental reforms. Yet the new government faced enormous obstacles. Russia was still fighting World War I, bleeding resources and morale. Peasants demanded land redistribution. Soldiers wanted to leave the front. Workers wanted better conditions.
Radical political factions competed for influence. The vacuum left by the monarchy was quickly filled by competing political visions, and none of them aligned. Meanwhile, the Romanov family found themselves in a strange limbo, technically deposed, but still royal, guarded, but not yet imprisoned. 2. The Romanovs under house arrest in Tsarskoye Selo. After Nicholas's abdication, the family remained at the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Their world shrank rapidly. Soldiers who once saluted now watched them with suspicion. Alexandra's authority vanished overnight. The palace, once full of bustling servants, grew eerily quiet. Yet within the family, life retained moments of warmth. Nicholas chopped wood and tended the garden. Alexandra wrote long diary entries.
The Grand Duchesses, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, tried to maintain routines, reading, sewing, sketching, caring for Alexei. Alexei, though fragile, played with his spaniel Joy and amused everyone with his humor. But beneath the surface, fear simmered. The guards changed. Some were sympathetic, others mocked the family. Former servants were dismissed. Access to newspapers was restricted. Letters were censored. Nicholas's abdication had not protected them. Events outside the palace walls were spiraling toward radical change. 3. The rise of the Soviets and Lenin's return. While the provisional government attempted moderation, a rival force grew rapidly, the Petrograd Soviet, representing workers and soldiers. The Soviets demanded immediate end to the war, redistribution of land, workers' control of factories, transfer of power from elites to the people. Their influence often rivaled or surpassed that of the provisional government. In April 1917, Vladimir Lenin, exiled leader of the Bolsheviks, returned to Russia. His message was uncompromising: peace, land, bread. All power to the Soviets. Lenin rejected cooperation with the provisional government altogether. His speeches electrified crowds and frightened moderates. As the war dragged on and shortages worsened, the Bolsheviks gained momentum. Russia was moving toward a showdown, and the Romanovs were caught in the middle. IV.
Transfer to Tobolsk, the quiet Siberian exile. By summer 1917, the provisional government feared that the Romanovs might be harmed by mobs or used by monarchists as a rallying symbol. They decided to move the family to Tobolsk, a remote town in Siberia. In August 1917, the Romanovs were transported quietly across Russia. They arrived at the governor's mansion, where their conditions were strict but relatively humane. Life in Tobolsk was simple. Nicholas chopped wood, read books, and took daily walks. Alexandra struggled with frail health but tried to maintain dignity. The daughters helped in the kitchen, baked bread, and repaired their dresses. Alexei suffered several dangerous bleeding episodes. Despite the unknown future, the family remained close, united by love and faith.
Yet the outside world was changing faster than anyone imagined. V. The Bolshevik Revolution, October 1917. In October 1917, Lenin and the Bolsheviks launched a nearly bloodless coup in Petrograd. The provisional government collapsed within 2 days. The Winter Palace was seized, and Kerensky fled. Now the Romanovs' fate fell into the hands of the Bolsheviks, a regime that viewed the monarchy as a symbol of oppression and a potential threat. The new government needed to eliminate all possibility of a monarchist restoration. Their situation worsened dramatically. In early 1918, the Bolsheviks decided to move the family again, this time under far harsher conditions. V. The transfer to Yekaterinburg. By April 1918, the Romanovs were divided during transport.
Nicholas, Alexandra, and Maria were moved first. Alexei, too ill to travel, remained with his sisters until May. Their new destination, Yekaterinburg, a city controlled by radical Bolsheviks known as the Ural Soviet. The family was confined in the Ipatiev house, renamed the House of Special Purpose. Their guards were strict and hostile. Windows were painted shut. Barbed wire surrounded the property. Their correspondence stopped. Servants were restricted. Conditions deteriorated. Food became scarce. Medical care for Alexei was inconsistent. The daughters were denied access to fresh air. Nicholas, once Tsar of the largest empire on earth, swept floors to pass time. Meanwhile, outside Yekaterinburg, the Russian Civil War raged. 7.
The Civil War and the race for the Romanovs. Russia fractured into warring factions. Red Army, Bolsheviks. White Army, monarchists, liberals, anti-Bolsheviks. Regional forces, foreign interventions, nationalist groups. By summer 1918, the White Army advanced into the Ural region. They hoped to rescue the Romanovs, both to save the imperial family and to delegitimize Bolshevik rule. The Bolsheviks feared that Nicholas, Alexandra, or even young Alexei could become a rallying symbol for the opposition. Their hold on power was fragile. Their enemies grew stronger every week. In July, White Army forces approached Yekaterinburg. Bolshevik leaders made a drastic decision. 8.
The execution of the Romanov family. Night of July 16th, 17th, 1918. On the night of July 16th, 1918, Yakov Yurovsky, commandant of the Ipatiev house, woke the family and informed them they were being moved due to fighting in the city. Nicholas, Alexandra, their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, along with 4 loyal attendants, were led to the basement. Nicholas asked, "What? What? What?" Yurovsky read a brief statement. The family was to be executed. History records what happened next with grim clarity. The firing squad opened fire. The room filled with smoke and deafening noise. The daughters, protected by jewels sewn into their corsets, survived the first shots, leading to chaotic, brutal violence. Within minutes, the Romanov dynasty ended.
The bodies were transported outside Yekaterinburg, burned, mutilated to hinder identification, and buried in secret graves. The Bolsheviks announced Nicholas's death publicly, but kept the fate of the family ambiguous. The world was shocked. Royal families across Europe mourned. Russia descended further into civil war that would last for years. 9. Aftermath, myth, mystery, and memory. For decades, rumors circulated that one daughter escaped, that Alexei fled, that Anastasia survived and resurfaced in Europe. These legends inspired books, films, and false claimants. But archaeological discovery and DNA testing in the late 20th and early 21st centuries confirmed the fate of the entire family.
Their remains were eventually identified, and in 1998, Nicholas II, Alexandra, and 3 daughters were buried in St. Petersburg. In 2007, the remains of Alexei and Maria, long missing, were discovered and confirmed through DNA analysis. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the Romanov family as passion bearers, honoring their humility, unity, and suffering. The Romanov story endures, not only as a political tragedy, but as a deeply human one. A loving family caught in the collapse of an empire, individuals swept into forces larger than themselves, the end of an era and the beginning of another.
I. The Empire after the Romanovs' death, summer 1918. When the Romanov family was executed in July 1918, the Bolsheviks did not immediately announce the deaths of the children or Alexandra. Only Nicholas II's death was made public. The rest remained shrouded in secrecy, partly to prevent international outrage, partly because the Bolsheviks feared retaliation. Russia was already dissolved into chaos. Civil war raged from the Baltic to the Pacific. Railroads collapsed. Cities suffered food shortages. Armies, red and white, fought over every province. The execution did not solve Lenin's problems. It merely eliminated a symbol. Across Europe, monarchies were falling. The Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, the Ottomans.
Nicholas II was only the first of several emperors to lose both his throne and his life in the great political collapse triggered by World War I. But the death of the Romanovs would become one of history's most symbolically charged tragedies. I. The Civil War and the Fate of the Russian State, 1918 to 1922. As fighting intensified, the former empire split into competing regions. Red Russia, ruled by Lenin. White Russia, monarchists, liberals, and military leaders. National independence movements in Ukraine, the Baltics, Finland, and the Caucasus. Foreign interventions, including British, French, American, and Japanese forces. Local warlords, who controlled territories with no centralized authority. It was the greatest fragmentation Russia had experienced since the time of troubles in the early 1600s. Ironically, the same crisis that brought the Romanovs to power. The Civil War became one of the bloodiest in modern history. More than 10 million deaths, famine, disease, and executions. Entire villages destroyed, millions displaced. The country Nicholas once ruled could no longer be governed by a monarchy. Everything had changed. By 1920, the Bolsheviks achieved major victories. By 1922, Lenin formally established the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. The Soviet state would define the 20th century, built partly on the ruins of the Romanov world. 3. International reaction to the Romanovs' execution. The Romanov family was closely related to most European dynasties. King George V of Britain was Nicholas II's first cousin. Several German princes were relatives of Alexandra. Royal families of Denmark, Greece, and Sweden had ties to them. The news stunned European courts, but nothing could be done. World War I was still underway when the executions occurred. The British government had earlier declined to rescue the Romanovs, fearing public backlash and political unrest. Germany, though interested in Alexandra's safety due to her Hessian origins, was also unable to intervene. The fall of the Romanovs became a symbol of the end of aristocratic Europe. IV.
The Ipatiev house, after the execution. After the murders, Bolshevik officials quickly removed evidence. Weapons were hidden, walls were scrubbed, though bloodstains remained visible. Jewelry found in the daughters' corsets was confiscated. The bodies were hidden in forest graves. Yekaterinburg soon fell to the White Army, who discovered the house abandoned. Investigators collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, and documented the execution room. But without bodies, no definitive conclusions were possible. The mystery lingered for decades. V. Rumors and false claimants. Because the Bolsheviks concealed the full truth, rumors exploded across Europe. Anastasia rumor. Stories spread that Anastasia had survived, either hiding during the execution or escaping afterward.
This legend became famous when a woman named Anna Anderson claimed to be the Grand Duchess. For decades, people debated her identity. Books, films, and public intrigue followed. But DNA testing in 1994 proved she was not related to the Romanovs. Alexei rumors. Others claimed Alexei fled east or was secretly rescued by loyalists. These myths persisted until his remains were found in the 2000s. Maria rumors. Similar stories surrounded Grand Duchess Maria, but all evidence now confirms that none of the Romanov children survived the execution. Yet the power of the myth shaped global imagination for nearly a century. VI. Discovery of the Romanov remains, 1991-2007. In 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, bones were discovered near Yekaterinburg. Scientists used DNA testing to identify Nicholas II, Alexandra, Olga, Tatiana, Anastasia, later confirmed, 4 loyal servants. The remains of Alexei and Maria were missing, but discovered in 2007 in a nearby site. Further DNA tests confirmed their identities. For the first time, the world had scientific evidence to close the Romanov chapter. 7. Burial and canonization. In July 1998, 80 years after the execution, Nicholas II, Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters were buried in the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, the resting place of Russian emperors. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the entire family as holy passion bearers, honoring their strength, dignity, and steadfast faith in suffering.